All right, everyone. I am Kelowna's Cougar Meat Kid, Collin Cutler, for the World of Grey podcast. This is take 2 of a video that was requested by our community. It's going to be a fact check episode. I mean, as best as you trust me fact checking things, probably more of a self-analyzation, critical thinking video when it comes to absorbing information. This is my second attempt at this video because the first video I did 3 fact checks and it was just way too long. It was half an hour of raw footage. I also got mixed up in some of the sources that seemed like the same site, but they were 2 different sites, which did make it really confusing because one Mark Zuckerberg was a part of, and one was by a guy who said he hated Mark Zuckerberg. So that's why I got those 2 confused. So what we're going to fact check today is an article by a website called Natural News, and it's going to be more of a fact check on the founder himself. One thing I couldn't really find with this Mike Adams of Natural News is what his educational background is, which is fine. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have any scientific background. I believe he's a reporter. But fact check me on that. So Mike Adams founded Natural News in 2005. What it looks like to me, first of all, when you go to the website, it's actually the first time I've gone to the actual Natural News website. A ton of pop-ups. So there's definitely a marketing strategy for revenue when it comes to advertisements. And from me just anecdotally looking at it, it looks like a lot of natural substances, like home remedies, things like that, outside of the Western medicine realm. When I looked up him and his background, he is claiming to have cured his type 2 diabetes through these natural remedies, and then promotes a lot of these sites. Looking further into it, because I'm a big follow the money guy, he has stock in a lot of these supplement companies, which isn't necessarily the worst thing. If you really believe in a product and you back it, you're going to promote it on your website. The problem is if you just takes 2 seconds to Google the credibility of Natural News, the site itself is being widely debunked by a lot of different websites, not just scientists, but just people debunking his sources. And he has a plethora of controversial articles, from climate change to anti-vaccination, kind of the most common type of false news that you're going to see out there, things that really like grab your attention because they're very contraindicated to the consensus. So this one's talking about climate change. It says NASA admits that climate change occurs because of changes in Earth's solar orbit and not because of SUVs and fossil fuels. So I've seen this come up quite a bit. Also note that Natural News has officially been banned from Facebook as propaganda or conspiratorial website. I don't necessarily agree with all these bannings, but I do think it warrants a conversation on what's okay to be published as fact and what's not. We live in this post-truth era that you see a lot with the Trump campaign, where you just have to build a narrative and facts don't matter. And then you have guys like Ben Shapiro that say like, oh, facts don't care about your feelings, and then he says a bunch of things that aren't true. So it becomes a really confusing whirlwind of content. And if you're not educated, like I, in these very specific topics like myself, it gets hard to navigate sources and makes it hard to figure out what we can trust and what we can't. Hence this video. So like I said, I'm not going to go through absolutely everything in this article, but I will go through a little bit of it. This video is a bit of a fact check, but it's more a video to help us, to encourage others to not just source their sources, not just fact check their own sources, but just to critically think about things when you read clickbaity headlines like this. And the reason I am such an advocate for this with the World of Grey podcast, and the reason we started this, is because I'm constantly seeing people share articles like this without taking the 30 seconds it took me to check the credibility of the source. Now, I've done a video with this in the past with Chisholm when we talked about fake news, so one of our live casts that we do every Sunday at 11 on Facebook, and our YouTube channel, which you can like and subscribe to. The problem with circulation sources or circulation news, you can Google that as well. This one's a little more complex when it comes to actual circulation news. This was an actual ploy that certain media outlets would use, where they would give another media source or a media company a source of a story, and then they would run the story, and then the first original media company that gave that iffy source would then cite their article for their own article, and then it's hard to track the original source. So a little bit more convoluted than what I'm talking about here. But if you go and just Google natural news and their credibility, you start to kind of get a picture of what they're all about, and start to understand that this is more of a site to clickbait people in to then funnel them in to their company that sells natural remedies for whatever ailment you have and want to cure. It's also good to note that MediaBiasFactCheck.org, I believe, has discredited this website, and that's what they do. They give you the source of, or they give you the credibility of different sources. And if you don't believe Google or me or MediaBiasFactCheck.org or whatever it is, and we're all in on it together to, hide the truth that climate change is a hoax, then I can't really help you, and you're not watching the right video, because I don't know what to say if you go through all this and still don't question it. So founder Mike Adams, not only does he have all these conspiratorial articles that he pushes, but he's also called Mark Zuckerberg evil, which I don't know if that plays into why he got banned or not. So let's go into the article a little bit here. Again, there's other websites that have fully debunked this article, which you can just Google it and they'll come up. If this video sparks interest and you want to know more, and you don't quite believe that this is an untrue article after the little bit of facts I give you, you can seek out other sources, and I encourage you to do so. This is how we learn. And this really didn't take me that long. I did a little bit of research a couple days ago, and then I actually read through the article today, which took me 10 minutes. So, and I'm not that bright. Let's just reiterate, I'm not an expert in any one of these fields. I'm a fitness guy. That's my area of expertise, is health and wellness. But this is interesting. And again, climate change isn't something I've done a ton of research on, but I do know in the little bit of research I've done that we have about a 97% consensus from the scientific community saying that man-made induced or human-caused climate change has affected our climate, or our world, the Earth, in the last few decades. So in the last 50 years or so. So basically what this article is saying is that NASA had posted an article, or written an article on their website, talking about a certain calculation called, I'm going to butcher the name of this, Milankovitch theory. So Malkovich is a climatologist that did a calculation trying to prove that the solar, and again, I'm going to butcher this, but the solar orbit of the Earth and its variabilities is what causes also the Earth's axis, so it's wobble that it sits on, which if you look at astrology, it's where they say our different eras come from, is that little bit of wobble that the Earth has on its gravitational axis. Fact check me on that. But that change in orbit is what causes a lot of things like growth and retreat of ice ages and other climate change time frames. But causes is what is causing climate change. So what the natural news argument or natural news article is arguing is that because of this NASA produced article, it is proving that climate change is solely caused by the variation of how close the Earth gets to the sun at different points in time, and so in the article saying it has absolutely nothing to do with SUVs, fossil fuels, and I think they added burgers, like eating burgers to the list, which we know by like a lot of these new age talking points against things like the Green New Deal that Alexander Ocasio-Cortez argues all the time, that this is one of the talking points that we see is what they're trying to do is like get rid of burgers. I just remember that being a really weird talking point that's being uttered when people are saying the Green New Deal is out to lunch. They want to take away your hamburgers, which is not at all what it's talking about. It's talking about eliminating the biggest causes of greenhouse gas emissions over time, the biggest one being fossil fuels. So just kind of to keep this all in context of where these arguments come from, they come from a very similar echo chamber of talking points, which I have heard over and over again. So when I see that, I automatically am suspicious of an article when they start adding buzzwords like they're going to take your burgers away. But basically this article is trying to argue that that is the only reason for climate change. Okay, so what's my thought process here? Well, it's saying that although this article was posted on NASA's website, which it is, it's posted in earthobservatory.nasa.gov. So because, or since they have put this article in, nothing's changed and no one has used this and cited this and admitted, NASA hasn't fully admitted in the mainstream media, or the mainstream media is covering it up, that this is the reason for climate change and nothing else. So for me, I'm going to go onto the government or the NASA website and I'm going to see what exactly this article says. So if you read the very first little bit of this article, it's true what they're saying. They're saying that climate change is highly affected by this varying orbit around the sun, Earth's varying orbit around the sun. So, and I mean, you can read the study on your own. I don't understand all of it, to be perfectly honest, when they get into some of the sciencey stuff. And it does say that this theory was actually largely ignored until 1976. And then the Journal of Science examined deep sea sediment cores and found that his theory did in fact correspond to periods of climate change. Specifically, the authors were able to extract records of temperature changes going back 450,000 years and found that the majority variations in climate change were closely associated with changes in geometry. And then it goes into some detail there of Earth's orbit. Indeed, ice ages had occurred when the Earth was going through different stages of orbit variations. Okay, so if that made no sense to you, which it made very little sense to me, it almost sounds like it's validating this original Natural News article. However, keep reading. At the very bottom, there's a National Research Council in 1982. There's a bit of a quote from them. And again, there's other linked sources in this NASA website that you can like rabbit hole and go into what that means a little bit further. But at the very end, it's saying orbital variations remain the most thoroughly examined mechanism of climate change on time scales of tens of thousands of years and are by far the clearest case of direct effect of changing insulation of the lower atmosphere of the Earth. So this is kind of an example of spinning the wheels when it comes to our post-truth era. I already know this. In the very limited research I've done, this is always what comes up, and this is always how the talking point of the climate is always changing gets debunked. And so when you read things like Natural News where they have these reductionist arguments where they just simplify it and they cherry pick the data, this becomes an argument for anyone that is anti-climate change or thinks it's a hoax. I have had this discussion with people before, and if I didn't continue to research, this is something that would catch my eye and make me start to believe that climate change is a hoax as well when you don't delve a little further. So the climate is always changing, which is basically, if you sum up the whole natural news article, they're basically just saying that the climate always changes over time because of orbit. And this is a talking point that's been spewed for as long as this climate change argument has kind of ramped back up. Another thing to note, if you watch that Vice movie that talks about Cheney's administration, it brings to light a little bit of trickery, for lack of a better term, that the Bush-Cheney administration did when it came to a lot of these political ideologies, talking points. Because climate change used to be called global warming, and it was the Cheney administration that lobbied or marketed the change from global warming to climate change because it didn't sound as bad. So then they could just argue climate change. The climate is always changing, right? Not the globe is warming unnaturally, right? So the climate is always changing. Up, down, up, down, up, down. The problem with this argument is when any research is talking about the climate changes naturally, the climate is always changing, they're talking about, in this case, tens of thousands of years or a 1 million year span, and then you look at the data. So in a 1 million year span, over tens of thousands of years of time, the climate might change. What the climate change scientists' 97% consensus is that we are negatively impacting this natural occurrence of climate change, and with our greenhouse gas emissions, we are ramping up global warming. There's also an argument I've heard, and I don't know how factual this is that we've actually fended off a natural occurring ice age with our man-made climate change over the last 50, 60 years or 100 years, or whatever that smaller time frame is. So over a grand scale of time, a million years or so, with tens of thousands of years intervals, yes, the climate changes and does these rapid spikes and drops of temperatures. I'm not going to get too technical because I'm not a climate change scientist, and that kind of is indicated to what we're doing here with this fact check. But when it comes to a human lifetime, or the future, the very near future, in some cases we're looking at the next 18 months, which is scary. There's argument that we are negatively impacting our climate to a point where there's a chance where it won't be habitable. And so this is the main argument. And for me, if you're going to ask just my 100% biased opinion, even if the data is off a little bit, it's still something we should start working on now. Like, even if it's not something that's going to affect us in 18 months, we know that it is going to affect us at some point. We have a 97% consensus saying that we are affecting global warming with our man-made produced or our man-produced emissions of greenhouse gases, etc. Right? So, I mean, climate change it's a big discussion, more than we can do in a 20-minute video. But this article, when you look into a lot of this stuff, or a lot of the facts that are in it, just tend to be quite inaccurate, or at the very least misleading. And I'll just leave you with this before I end this video. So there's a comprehensive review of the cause of global warming, again using the original scientific concern of global warming. This was posted in 2012 as well, so grain of salt. But we're talking about global warming contributors over the past 50 to 65 years, and there's a scale. So this is skepticalscience.com. I've checked the credibility of this website as well, and it was made by a cognitive scientist, a actual scientist, who made this site after going to a lecture with a senator that was saying climate change was a hoax, and a Republican senator, and he's trying to get some better information, which is what I always say, the answer to bad speech is not censorship, it's more speech. So on skepticalscience.com, they have a scale that shows a bunch of different contributors to global warming, and from a human perspective and from a natural perspective. And if you look at the human causes, we are We are contributing a giant percentage to all of these categories. The categories are listed and broken down in the legend, and the natural occurrences are either a very small percentage of contribution or actually a negative contribution in the last 50 to 60 years. So pretty interesting, and I feel like I want to spend some more time delving into this, but not really the point of this video. So let me know what you think. Remember to like and subscribe. Click the little bell that should be around there somewhere, and check out some of our other videos that are like this. If you want to start thinking a little bit more critically, we do our live chat on Facebook at 11 a.m. every Sunday on a bunch of different varying topics, so you can get involved in that conversation. Leave any comments below if you agree, disagree, want to know more, and please keep supporting our World of Grey community. We are here just to help everyone explore that middle ground of any argument and to start thinking just a little bit more critically. And I think that's what we need in this society divided by black and white arguments. And we are the World of Grey. I am Collin King Collin Collar. Thank you for watching this video. Peace, love.